Welcome to Frankly, My Dear, the podcast that explores just how bananas things were in classic Hollywood. Classic Hollywood was wholesome, right? People talk about the films with such nostalgia and wish for those days back. But what I find more interesting is the seedy underbelly, the backstory, the movie trivia, the backdrop of those films and what went on behind the scenes. These were real people. They had their own stories. They soldiered on to create these films that you so love, and I appreciate even more now by knowing their lives and struggles. So join me as we uncover the mystery and peel back the velvet curtain of classic Hollywood to not just highlight the scandals, but the triumphs of these film giants. Welcome to the Easter episode of Frankly, My Dear. Just like with St. Patrick's Day, there aren't a ton of movies to talk about, but the ones that I do have to talk to you about today are big ones. So let's get started. The one that I watched every year, and I'm actually planning a podcast episode later this year on this one to celebrate its 70th anniversary, is The Ten Commandments. And this is actually the 1999 DVD version. Do you guys know why? That year, they actually did not run it on ABC. They skipped that year for whatever reason. I was really irritated, and that was the year that came out. So it's kind of crazy to think how long ago that was. But I don't think they've made that mistake again. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe they have. So that is one that I definitely identified with Easter because it was on every year. We would watch it. It would take forever because it's a long movie to begin with, and then they would have commercials in it, right? So that it took, 4 to 5 hours. So it is something I still watch every year. Again, I am going to have a special guest that I will be talking with about that movie a little bit closer to the actual anniversary date. So that is one of them. The other one that I still associate a bit with Easter is The Sound of Music, because that would be what NBC would be running while ABC was running The Ten Commandments. That was how they both interacted there. So Sound of Music has nothing to do with Easter, except for the fact that that is the movie they chose to put on to compete with The Ten Commandments, which I don't know if you can really compete with The Ten Commandments on Easter. So I'm not talking about either one of those. So the one I'm going to be talking about today is Easter Parade. So this is one of my favorites. Again, not a ton about Easter, but enough. So the movie itself starts on one Easter. We cover an entire year to the next Easter. So with this one, I love Judy Garland. She is one of my favorite actresses. So I wanted to highlight her. I even did write a historical fiction or biographical fiction book on her called The Constricting Corset. It is fiction. It is not a biography, but it is back here. So I did a lot of research for that book, and then I did some additional research for the podcast today. The problem with Judy Garland is she often gets boiled down to the Wizard of Oz and the drugs, right? The amphetamines, all of that ended up killing her. But there's so much more to look at than that. There are additional performances that get overlooked, this one being one of them. So I wanted to dive into, and there's a lot to unpack here with Easter Parade. So I'm going to start with Easter Parade itself, because this is based on the yearly, they call it a parade. It's really people walking around down Fifth Avenue in their fancy clothes after church on Easter Sunday. So this movie does have Easter vibes. Other than that, at the beginning, we see Don, played by Fred Astaire. He is buying Easter presents. It is Easter Eve, I guess you would say. It's the day before Easter. So he's buying presents for his dancing partner / girlfriend. And one of them is a bunny. He also buys her an Easter bonnet. And then, as I mentioned, you do have a year-long storyline where it starts on one Easter and ends on the next Easter. So it's April 1911 through April 1912. The movie itself was made in 1947, released in 1948. So this film had songs by Irving Berlin. and it was inspired by the title song, but it wasn't actually the first time this song was used. It was first used in a 1933 Broadway review as Thousands Cheer by Marilyn Miller and Clifton Webb. So Irving Berlin did write the song originally inspired by the Easter Parade in New York. So it started in the
1870s.
And as I mentioned, people would dress up, show off their fancy Easter bonnets, right? The women would wear fancy clothes, big hats, that kind of thing. They would walk down 49th to 57th Street. So that is what it is right now. I'm not sure if that's the exact parameters in the 1800s, but you can actually still go do this. So they do have that between 10 and 4 on Easter Sunday in New York if you want to go walk down Fifth Avenue. And this was not filmed on location though, so you won't be where Fred and Judy were, but it is still pretty fun. It started out as a spontaneous event that then gained popularity. So by 1947, when this was made, it was estimated that the event itself drew over 1 million people. So it was a big deal. And as of 2024, though, it's only estimated around 100,000. So the popularity has waned a little bit, but people still like to go. And I was looking at some pictures from this, and the bonnets now are even more outlandish and the makeup, and there's a lot going on. So there are definitely still enthusiasts of this event. So it still holds true. The biggest scene, so we do see Fred and Judy in this parade twice during the course of the movie. So they're at the beginning, quite by accident. I'll go into more of the storyline later, but they quite by accident end up in the Easter parade at the beginning because they were rehearsing. So they end up walking through. Neither one of them, like Fred is dressed nicely, Judy's dressed nicely too, but not quite to the extent of the women walking down Fifth Avenue. So you have Ann Miller that shows up. She is all fancy. She has her dogs that match her and all of that jazz. So I don't know if that was a common thing that people brought their dogs. I feel like maybe it could have been a thing in real life because, you're going on a walk, I guess. So, and then the scene at the end with Fred and Judy is a little bit more elaborate. There were 700 extras, and the set itself was built 10 feet high, and then the rest of it's actually a painting. So when this was released, people were super impressed. They loved it. They thought it was a great, visual effect for the time. And it's just really cool to see. And for audiences, it was a big deal. This movie was a massive success. So I'll talk a little bit more about that impact a little bit later on the actual performers, but it did very, very well, which everybody kind of needed, especially Judy and Fred both needed a win. So one other thing I wanted to mention though, when you're watching it, you don't even realize that it's 1911, honestly, because I always forget. At certain points, the skirts are longer. Some of them seem like they could be from that time period, but most of the fashions seem to be 1947, 1948 fashions, honestly. So there doesn't seem really to be a reason why they said it in the past, unless they were really trying to hit on that time period that like Irving Berlin envisioned. But beyond the horse-drawn carriages at the end, and when Hannah goes and orders food, you really don't notice. So like she pays 15 cents for sandwich, pie, and milk. So you might notice that is far below even what it would have been in the 1940s. And her $15 a week job. So I also got to explain a little bit to my kids when we watch this about inflation, because they're like, how does that even make sense that it's that cheap? You know what I mean? So that was very interesting. So now that we have some information about the backdrop of the story, now I'm going to go into how this got made. So the cast, we will get into a bit about just how it all began. So now we are going to talk a bit about the cast itself. So let's start with They all have a little bit of drama, but let's start with mostly the least dramatic character, which is Johnny, who is played by Peter Lawford, right? So Peter Lawford was in the Rat Pack later. He had some drama with Frank Sinatra later. Funny enough, Frank Sinatra was actually originally going to play in Easter Parade. It was originally Judy, Frank Sinatra, Gene Kelly, and Katherine Grayson. Oh, and Red Skelton. According to a 1947 article published that February in The Hollywood Reporter, that was to be the cast. So that obviously changed quite a bit. So we have, instead of Frank Sinatra, we have Peter Lawford in the role of Johnny. Johnny is Don's friend. He actually falls in love with Hannah, played by Judy. But Judy is in love with Don. Don originally is in love with Nadine, played by Ann Miller. Nadine likes Johnny. So there's this funky sort of square, not even a love triangle. There's a whole bunch going on. So Johnny is a college student, so they keep calling him Professor, at least Don does a whole bunch, just because he's, furthering his education, and they are making that distinction. So again, it was originally going to be Frank Sinatra in this film, and I think that probably would have been his part since Gene Kelly was supposed to be playing the Fred Astaire part, right? So it would have been interesting to me, and you guys let me know what you think, but if Frank Sinatra had been in it, I guarantee you there would have been more than one song. Peter Lawford was not a strong singer. He was enjoyable to listen to, in my opinion, and he tried, but we'll be honest, he's no Sinatra. So they definitely would have had more songs had Sinatra been in it. So these two, Peter Lawford and Frank Sinatra, did already know each other at this point, even though the Rat Pack, as they formed it later, was many years away. They had worked together in It Happened in Brooklyn, which was released actually in April of 1947. Peter had one song in that. It was called Whose Baby Are You? Sinatra also sang it. Peter Lawford sang it, he danced. It's one of my favorite parts in that film, despite my love of Frank Sinatra, just because he's trying so hard. And it's enjoyable. As I said, he had an enjoyable voice, but it's not to the same degree as Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra is iconic, right? So he had done that, and then he had also recently completed Good News, where he had 5 songs that he participated in, but I believe no solo songs. So that was a bit different. So he had an ensemble around him and supporting him there too. He was coming off a pretty solid film. The little bit of drama is that he was also in On an Island with You. So at this point, there's no singing in that for him. If you watch that film, it is my least favorite performance of his because he just seems so cranky the whole time. His character, the plot, he comes off as a little bit icky, and I wonder if that is because he was not in a happy place. He and Lana Turner had just broken up. Apparently he wore some of his gold jewelry that were gifts from her, so he was a little bit mopey. And I think that Easter Parade must have cast him before that because Louis B. Mayer was not happy with him. They wanted to set him up as a leading man, and that film, he just kind of screwed it up. So he does not come across that way in Easter Parade, which is very fortunate for him and his career because then they didn't, can him. And I had a lot of fun watching. And I also think it would have been interesting, though, to see Sinatra in this role, and it would have been, as I said, a different role. But later on, he and Judy Garland actually had an affair. They weren't together at this point. It was a couple years off, but that could have, that would have been interesting to see them work together because they didn't complete any films together, right? So they did radio shows and some other show appearance stuff, but they never worked together in a film. So, whatever the reason that Peter Lawford was in this movie, it really worked well for him. A little bit tragic of a character because he doesn't actually get his love story, but again, Hannah, played by Judy, and Don, played by Fred Astaire, are really the focus of the film. So for that, he's a lot of fun to watch. He does well with the song that he sings, which is Fellow with an Umbrella. Super cute sequence. He and Judy had met before. He was actually an extra in Girl Crazy that she did with Mickey Rooney, and he had one line. So if you look for him, you can find him in that film. So they did already know each other. So their dynamic, even though her character doesn't reciprocate his love, they are still a lot of fun to watch together. So now we will go on to the next person, and that is how Fred Astaire became Don Hughes. So Fred Astaire is a little bit less dramatic when he was cast as Don. His circumstances weren't as dramatic as either Ann Miller or Judy Garland. He was retired. He'd been retired for about 2 years, so there was something that maybe he was slightly concerned about his dancing ability, but you don't see that here. He's Fred Astaire. He pulls it back. And then after this, he stayed in the movies for quite a while. So he had retired. He was enjoying his horse that he owned and the horse races, according to his daughter. She talked about that a little bit in the extras on Easter Parade. I have the double set. So the way he came into the role, though, was dramatic for Gene Kelly. So originally, this was foreseen as a vehicle for Judy Garland, Gene Kelly, and then also to have Vincent Minnelli directing. They had done The Pirate together earlier in the year, and I'm going to talk about that a bit because Judy had a very rough time with that, so we will get into that a little bit later. So that was the original intent. Minnelli was removed first. Again, I will talk about that. Gene Kelly was about a month into rehearsals, and he was very athletic. He loved sports. You guys have probably seen him dance, right? If you're a classic movie fan, chances are you've seen Gene Kelly. So he's very athletic. He hits really hard. It's not surprising that he would also enjoy sports. So on the weekends, he would play various sports at his house, depending on which source you look at. He could have been playing football. Most likely he was playing volleyball. So he was playing volleyball about a month into rehearsals, and he broke his ankle. Nothing worse for a dancer, right? So you're automatically out. He can't perform. I guess they could have held the picture for him, but they didn't, upon his insistence. So I don't know if maybe he wanted to make sure Judy got what she needed. They were friends. Maybe he didn't want it to get delayed because of what a hard time she had on The Pirate. They were expecting The Pirate to be hugely successful, which is why they set it up this way. It was not. So a little bit more on that later. So Gene broke his ankle, and he suggested Fred Astaire to replace him, despite the fact that Fred Astaire was like, hey, I'm retired. I'm not doing stuff right now. So Gene said, and so Gene lied to Louis B. Mayer because he didn't want him to know what he was really doing when he got hurt. So this is a quote from Gene. I told Mayer I'd been rehearsing a rather complicated dance step because I didn't think he'd respond too well to the truth. I said, why don't you give Fred Astaire a ring? So he did. So they reached out to Fred Astaire, and then Fred called Gene because he wanted to talk about this. So he wanted to ask him if he was sure about this, if he didn't want to do the picture. Fred thought it was a really good picture. They had sent him the screenplay, so he got a chance to see this. So he's like, hey, are you sure you don't want to do this? So I'm not sure how long it took Gene to recover. As I said, like maybe they would have considered holding the picture for him, but Gene said no. So Gene was like, hey, you'd be doing me a favor because Louis B. Mayer thinks I'm a bum. They think I'm a bum. They think I hurt my leg on purpose. Please do this. So Fred was excited. He hadn't worked with Judy before, so he was excited to get the chance to work with Judy, right? So he came out of retirement, and he was at the studio at MGM just 3 days after Gene Kelly's injury. So essentially that next week after that weekend that he got hurt. So you can tell that he was ready to go. Maybe he just needed the right thing to come along. Maybe he just needed a break and he wasn't planning on staying retired. Who knows? Maybe he just needed the right role to come along. And that role was Don Hughes. Okay, so next we're going to get into the character of Nadine Hale. So Nadine is Don Hughes' original partner. She essentially dumps him at the beginning. She's like, hey, I'm going to go do another show. They can't hold me. You signed all the contracts. So she comes off as kind of a jerk. But originally, this was to be played by Sid Charisse, who is a fabulous dancer, just great. More ballet, I would say, than tap. Ann Miller is tap dancing. I often equate her to kind of the female version of Gene Kelly. She is very powerful in her dancing. She is very exact. Like, you can tell that she knows what she's doing. She is fabulous. So up until this point, Ann Miller had been working for Columbia, and Sid Charisse was supposed to be in this movie. There are different accounts as to what actually happened to Sid Charisse. So the most likely one is because she was also on an island with you, like Peter Lawford was, and she tore ligaments in her knee. So she didn't warm up, something happened, she got hurt. So that is one of the accounts. Another source says she tore ligaments in her ankle. Another source says it was doing a leap. So whatever happened, Sid Charisse got hurt. She could not perform this part. I believe it's the most likely, because it's documented that she was injured during On an Island with You. So that's probably what happened. So she was cast in the course of filming that last movie, got injured, couldn't commit to this one. So they needed a replacement. And Ann Miller saw her shot here. So she is interesting because I think I had blocked this out or forgotten about it. She had actually sort of dated Louis B. Mayer, which sounds super gross because she was like early 20s. He was 60, a couple years before this. It is often incorrectly cited that she got into Easter Parade because of Louis B. Mayer. She technically didn't. He wanted to marry her a couple years before this. She said no. They only ever went out with her mother. So I'm not sure the exact specifications on that relationship. If it could have just been a, hey, he's a powerful connection and he saw something romantic in it and she didn't. I'm not really sure. So they hadn't been together. He was really kind of upset then that she went and married Reese Milner, who was a completely terrible dude. Because what happened to poor Ann Miller, she was 8 months pregnant and he pushed her down the stairs. So she fell, broke her back, lost the baby at 8 months. I can't even imagine. Like, that is just one of the most horrible things. So not only did she get severely injured, she lost her baby that was about to be born. They must have had everything. Like, she must have been prepped for it. Terrible circumstances. She actually filed for divorce from the hospital to get away from this guy. That is awesome that she did that. When this spot became available, she did talk to Louis B. Mayer, and he's like, I can't just give this to you. You have to audition. So at least he didn't, try to block her from it. He just said it was not up to him. She had to prove it. And she did, right? Because she is a fabulous dancer. And this is where her contract with MGM started as well. And she did some other stellar performances. Kiss Me Kate is one of them. On the Town. She went on to do some great things after this movie. So this was really a key turning point for her after some terrible circumstances. Something else to consider too, her solo number in Easter Parade, Shaking the Blues Away, she was in a ton of pain because of her injury and she was wearing a back brace. So just think about that for a moment. And if you've seen her, you can't tell any of it. She powers through that dance sequence like nothing's wrong, right? She is just amazing to watch. And I think it's so awesome that she went and chased that and ended up being the best person for it. So now let's get into Judy. There's a lot to unpack here. So now we're getting into the most dramatic person in this film, Judy Garland. And when you look at her performance in this, she looks great. She's gorgeous. She seems healthy, which she does almost all to the time, right? But we know that behind the scenes, she isn't necessarily. She did have a great time filming Easter Parade. I will put that out there. So that was great. Fred made it a very enjoyable experience for her. But what originally happened, she had just filmed The Pirate, right? So I love that film, but it failed. It did not do well at the box office. She was not doing well during the filming. She had a really, really hard time. She broke down pretty hard. The drugs and just the filming, she missed tons of days of filming. And she was very concerned about Vincent Minnelli and Gene Kelly and how they were talking, and she felt shut out of the creative process. She became extra paranoid and erratic, and she was firmly into the whole cycle of the amphetamines, barbiturates, all of that stuff to keep her up and down, right? So she was having a super hard time. There's even a scene where there are torches, and she became convinced that she was going to get burned, and she basically had a complete breakdown. She was already having a hard time, and then an extra thing that happened, she caught Vincent Minnelli in bed with another guy. That kind of pushed her over the edge a bit too. So not only was he cheating on her, but there was the extra circumstance there. She slit her wrist. She tried to off herself. This is the first time. There were others, but this was the first time that happened. She was admitted into a psychiatric hospital for 2 weeks. But we know 2 weeks, I mean, that's not enough to deal with everything, right? So while it may have helped her in the short term, that wasn't going to completely fix everything. But we know that the studio doesn't care, right? They pushed those stars as hard as they could for as long as they could. And so she came back out, and they don't really, care about her well-being. They just wanted her to work, right? So they had this all set, and they're like, okay, they wanted these 3 together. And her psychiatrist advised her not to work with her husband right now because of the circumstances and what she was going through. She did end up pushing that point, got Vincent taken off the picture. He was the first one out. Through my research, it does seem that he was disappointed about that. He was looking forward to it, but for her well-being, they could not work together at that point. So that happened. The thing with Gene happened. He was out, and then you had some other changes as well. A couple of things happened that changed the course of the story itself, and then a little bit more about the circumstances on set that I will get into next. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit how Easter Parade came to be made at MGM. So it has 17 Irving Berlin songs, and Irving Berlin at this time in the mid-1940s was well known. Easter Parade ended up being his first movie with MGM. He was originally considering 20th Century Fox for Easter Parade. However, they didn't give him the money and the percentage that he wanted. So he was already working with producer Arthur Freed a bit, and Arthur Freed was like, hey, sell it to me. Give it to me. Let MGM do it. And so Irving Berlin gave him a dollar figure. Freed went to Louis B. Mayer, who told him to buy it. Again, it was originally intended for Judy, Gene, and Vincent together as a team, and he thought that would be a worthwhile investment. So they had Hackett and Goodrich write the story, but it ended up being a little bit darker than what they wanted. They wanted it to be more lighthearted. So they brought in Sidney Shelton, who had just done The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer with Cary Grant and Shirley Temple. He had just done that story, which is a really fun one, by the way. And they told him, hey, make this more of a musical comedy than as dark as it was going to be. So he worked on that and changed things up. And then also at the time, I thought this was super interesting. So Roger Edens was involved as well. He was kind of a backup for Arthur Freed. But if you know a lot about Judy Garland, you will recognize this name because he was actually there when she auditioned. He played piano for her. Her father wanted to do it, but he was kind of fumbling a little bit. So Roger Eden took over for Judy's actual audition and played piano for her and worked with her a whole bunch as she was learning how to use her voice and how to sing for film. So he was a big part of her life, and I thought it was kind of cool that he was involved here again as well. They started principal photography in November of 1947, and they filmed it in 10 weeks. So the intent was to hit for Easter, but they ended up being late, and so it didn't hit quite there, but it still ended up being a massive success. So the first thing that they filmed is toward the beginning of the movie. Again, you have Fred Astaire, Don, shopping for Nadine for Easter. And this is kind of a weird scene to me though, honestly. So he goes to this store and there's a kid with a bunny, and then the kid puts the bunny down. So then Don decides that he wants the bunny. So then he and this kid have a weird back and forth thing, and Fred Astaire gets to sing Drum Crazy and play drums. So if you weren't sure, he could actually play drums. According to his daughter, he played them at home, and this is kind of funny. So when he wanted his drums out of the way, he would put them in the bathtub. I mean, I guess that's a nice place to put them out of the way as long as you don't want to take a bath. I don't know. The man playing the little boy said they took a long time to set up the cameras and there were a lot of takes to get things perfect. But on the sidelines, Fred would show him like different steps and they had a pretty fun time doing that. And then afterwards, Fred sent him a bicycle as a thank you. So, I mean, Fred just seems like just a fun person to be around and a very kind-hearted person. And I think that's really what Judy needed at this point, too. Not that she and Jean didn't get along or weren't friends, but I think Fred's extra calmer nature was probably really good for her. So essentially what happens is Don gets this bunny. He goes to Nadine. She tells him that she has decided to go do her own solo act. Sorry, bye. And he's like, but I thought we were in love. And then Johnny comes over and you see how she just lights up when Johnny comes over. So you're like, oh, yeah, she's not in love with Don. Even if she was, she's not anymore. So then he goes to drown his sorrows at the bar and there's a floor show. That is where he discovers Judy. Or Hannah. So Hannah is there performing. He's all drinky and he's like, I can teach any girl to dance. I don't need Nadine. So he offers her a job and is like, I can pay you $150 a week. And then she doesn't realize who he is right away. This is an interesting plot point that I find though, because she knows his name and knows who he is. And then the next day they meet at the rehearsal hall, and when they're walking down Fifth Avenue, they see Nadine, but she doesn't know, Hannah doesn't know who she is, which I find interesting. Like, if she knows who Don Hughes is, wouldn't she know who his partner is? Unless she just doesn't recognize her, which I guess could be. So anyway, Judy sings Michigan, which is a great song and parallels her life a little bit. So she was discovered and all of that jazz. So Don then goes on to wants to make her up to be like Nadine, but obviously singing is her strong suit, not the tap dancing. Although she does great with the tap dancing, but it's Judy Garland. you gotta let her sing. So it takes him a little bit to realize that. And I guess, so this story is debated. Sidney Shelton in an interview said that he was telling Judy Garland a story on, the sideline of the set or whatever. And she was getting called to go do this scene, which was supposedly a kissing scene with Fred Astaire. So she kept putting it off. Hey, finish your story, and was ignoring this. And Sydney's like, don't you want to go do this? Like, what, are you stalling? Do you not want to do the movie? So supposedly she told him that she had never met Fred before, and they had all assumed that she did. So then he says that he went over and introduced her, and then they did the scene. However, there is a differing opinion here with biographers that say, hey, they had met before and had done like radio together. So there is some conflicting information there. Sidney also said that Fred wanted him to rework this scene with Ann Miller, thinking that he was too mean to her. And Sidney tried to be like, okay, but it's a character, right? You're not actually being mean to Anne. It might feel like you are, but you're not. And so Fred's like, no, I know. And then he's like, can you rewrite it anyway? Which I guess kind of makes sense because, I mean, Don is supposed to be in love with Nadine. Like, you can't just turn that off. He can be mad at her, for sure, but there's still that, and he still needs time to get over that, right? You also have Jules Munchin in here, and what they used to do is they would take an actor that hadn't been given huge roles yet and put him as a smaller part in a movie to act as a screen test. So there is a scene where he acts out making a salad, and then he was hilarious. And if you watch Judy, she just can't stop laughing. She tries, and she like tries to cover it, but you can still see her shaking. So she found him super funny. And then he did go on to star in On the Town. So I mean, and Take Me Out to the Ball Game and additional things as well. So he basically had his screen test in this film. And then the costumes were by Irene. So here's another thing that doesn't seem very much like 1911, looks like 1940s. So now we're going to get into a little bit more about the plot and some more about the songs as well. So once Don figures out what is wrong, because Nadine tells him, hey, you have her mimicking me. And there is an interesting scene that shows this where Judy is wearing this super feathery dress, and the feathers are just floating off all over the place. This is actually a reference to another Fred and Ginger movie where she wore something like that and the feathers were coming off as well, but she loved the dress so much that she didn't care. So it's referencing something that actually happened to Fred Astaire, but Judy's dress, like, they are just all over the place. It's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, after this, Nadine's like, stop having her imitate me. My friends are laughing. And he's like, wait, I'm not, she has never even seen you. Yet again, Hannah knows who he is, so I don't understand how that works. So he comes back and he's like, sing I Love a Piano, right? And then they do a little dance, and then we have this montage of their growth, and their costumes get more sophisticated, the songs get a little bit more sophisticated, the dancing gets more sophisticated. So we see that they are making it. Those songs in that montage were chosen by Roger Edens, and I think he did a great job of showing the progression of their show. At the end of that montage, they audition for the Ziegfeld Follies. They get in, but once Don finds out that Nadine is in it, he's like, no, we're not going to do this. You don't belong in the same show with her. Hopefully he means that she is better than her, or than her, right? So he turns it down, but then fixes a different show, right? And throughout the course of this, Johnny and Hannah have met. Peter Lawford sings His Fellow with an Umbrella, really wants to date her. She reveals that she's in love with Don, and so they're just friends now, which is fine. And then you also have the Ann Miller number, Shaking the Blues Away. Super cool outfit. You have this black kind of leotard thing and this yellow skirt that she opens up. It's really well done. And you can't tell she's in as much pain as she is, or that she has that back brace. She says that it is one of the best tap dances that she has ever done, and that it took her a lot of courage to do it, given what her body had been through. So that, knowing that, makes it even more impressive that she was able to do that. So then we get to Hannah and Don finally figuring out that they like each other, right? So he's like, hey, we have this show now. Come over, we'll have dinner. She goes over there thinking it's a date, thinking they're going to celebrate, and then he starts talking business. She starts getting mad and goes into this, you're not even a human being, you're nothing but a pair of dancing shoes. And then she's like, I bet you don't even know what color my eyes are because you've never paid enough attention. So she closes her eyes. He kisses her with her eyes closed. And then he goes, they're brown. And then you also have the, why didn't you tell me I was in love with you? Which is kind of funny because this is the exact line that Gene Kelly says to her character in For Me and My Gal. Exact same line. So it would have been kind of funny if it had been Gene and then he's saying the exact same line in more than one film. So then we get to their show, which is a cute show. You have Steppin' Out with My Baby, which is really cool. Would not work as a stage show at all, right? Because you have Fred Astaire in slow motion, the people in the background moving regularly. And my kids are asking me about how they might have done this. My guess is that they probably had the screen, because it looks like a screen, right? So they have a screen behind him. And my guess is that they sped that up while he was dancing and then slowed the whole thing down. That's the only way it makes sense to me. So it's a really cool effect, but wouldn't happen in a stage show, right? But it was really interesting to see anyway. And then we have a couple of swells, which is amazing. And Judy took that tramp persona thing and used it in later shows, right? That was the kind of thing that she just loved. She had a blast. So they were supposed to like kind of help with the look. So Fred kept like trying to do stuff and going to her and being like, is this enough? Is this enough? And she'd be like, what? So then she went and did it, blacked out her teeth, did this whole thing. And she's like, oh, do you think this is too much? Do you think this is too much? So she kind of helped him a bit with his costume because he'd never done anything like that before. He's the elegant, tucks and tails sort of dancer. And then you have this completely different sort of outfit, sort of song. He was out of his element. So while he helped her quite a bit by being that sort of more calming, supportive presence, she helped him figure out how to do this song. And this is also kind of cool. And again, I had to explain this to my kids, but I'm like, they're not moving. I'm like, do you guys notice this? So they had like a conveyor belt with this, I guess I call it a banner. I'm not really sure. So the scenery behind them was moving and they were pretending to walk, right? So it makes it look really cool and they don't actually have to move anywhere. But that is just such a fun scene. And as I said, Judy just looks so happy. She looks like she's having a blast, which is always cool to see because given what her life was like and some of the circumstances surrounding all of that, it's just nice to see her happy, honestly. So you have all of that, and then they go to the roof, because apparently they're in the same building as Ziegfeld Follies. So he's like, hey, I made a reservation up there. We need to celebrate. Our show is a super success. Let's go do that. So they go, and one other thing I want to mention that was probably supposed to be in the show that they ended up cutting was the Mr. Monotony number. So if you have seen Summer Stock, you know the Get Happy number, exact same outfit. There was actually a lot of speculation about whether Get Happy was cut from Easter Parade because it's the same outfit. And so what happened with Summer Stock, they filmed most of it. She lost like 20 pounds and then they filmed Get Happy. So she looks different. She looks more like Easter Parade, like the physique from Easter Parade. She was thinner than she does in the rest of Summer Stock. So there was some question over whether that was actually cut from Easter Parade, but it was not. It was Mr. Monotony. And the reason they cut it is they felt it was maybe too modern of a number. And like the outfit doesn't really work for 1911. So they ended up cutting that, which you can still see it. Like it's on the extras on the DVD. You can find it on YouTube. It's actually a really cute number. Anyway, that was probably supposed to be part of the show that they ended up cutting. So in the movie, they go up to the Ziegfeld roof or whatever, and they watch Nadine's show. This is honestly not my favorite part of the movie. It does kind of remind me of, if we're going before this film, there was CoverGirl, which was with Rita Hayworth and Gene Kelly. There's a section in there where they have women, sitting still and they have the outline of like a magazine cover. So it's very similar. You have this dude singing about all these pretty girls, whatever. They kind of do a satire of it in Singing in the Rain also. Like they're showing these different women and it's kind of more comical than this tone and the CoverGirl tone, which was a little bit more serious. So we sit through that. Again, not my favorite part of the movie, but Ann Miller's dress is gorgeous. It is white and then it has like this red feathery stuff on it. Really pretty. And one thing that she promised for this is that she would wear flats to dance with Fred Astaire because she was so tall. So she would have towered over him with heels. So she does this magazine cover number with these heels. And then she goes backstage, comes back out, and she's wearing flats because she then entices Don into dancing with her and doing one of their old numbers it only happens when I dance with you, which is what they did at the beginning. And actually, Judy's saying that during the course of the movie as well. So he dances with her. Of course he does. Judy gets mad. Of course she does. But he tries to explain when he tries to find her later, I had to dance with her. And then she's like, well, you made that very obvious. It's like, well, the people in the audience thought it would be a cool thing. So he didn't feel like he could say no, right? So he dances with her. Hannah gets mad. Hannah leaves. And she goes back to the dive bar and talks to the bartender. And then sings this whole Better Luck Next Time, which is a beautiful and sad ballad. Because it's basically saying, oh, you only get this kind of love once and now it's gone. So now she's sad. They tend to be a little bit dramatic in movies before they talk to each other, right? The whole miscommunication, third act breakup sort of thing is a common trope in both films and in books, honestly. So not really surprising. They don't break up very long, though. So she goes back to her hotel. He is waiting for her. He tries to talk to her through the door, and then this cop or hotel security or something basically tells him to move along because he thinks that he's just bothering her. So by the time she opens the door, he's already gone because the security guy told him to leave. So I'm going to segue here for a second, and then we'll talk about the real ending, because the original ending, and this is not the first time that Judy has changed something to make a movie better. She did it with Meet Me in St. Louis too. So in this film, Don goes back to Nadine the night before the Easter parade, which here he just dances with her. And then Hannah's left with Johnny. So all four of them go to the Easter parade, and Hannah ends up walking with Don for a bit. This is the original ending. So Hannah ends up walking with Don a little bit, and then he asks her if she's really going to marry Johnny. And then he's like, but I found out last night that I really love you. And then that's the end of the movie. And Judy was like, this ending is bad. She tried to tell them. They didn't want to listen to her, right? They were like, oh, you're just an actress, you know, whatever. We got this. And it's not your department. It's not your place, right? And she's like, no, it is my place. It is all of our place. We are the ones playing these characters. This ending is bad. So they kept trying to deflect and put her off. However, Irving Berlin was in the room. And he's like, she's right. This ending is bad. So they tried to argue with him. And he's like, either you do it her way or I'm out. He basically threatened to pull the whole thing. And then they worked it out. So they changed the ending. So the new ending has Johnny coming to Hannah and then trying to be like, oh yeah, he's auditioning girls, you know, whatever. And she's like, what? So, and she's like, I didn't sleep all night. And she was really upset, right? Because she thought they kind of broke up and he left. She didn't know that he got kicked out by security. And then she's like, I don't know what to do. And Johnny's like, well, you know, what would you do? And she's like, well, it's easier, you know, as a guy because they can. And then she kind of trails off. So then she does these traditional, you know, like guy things. She sends him flowers, right? The lilies for Easter. So we have another Easter thing here, but she sends him that. And then she sends him a bunny, which I don't know what they're going to do with the bunny, but I mean, Nadine did get a new dog from Johnny at the beginning of the movie for Easter. So maybe it was a thing to just give pets. Not a great idea just to buy pets for holidays, but you know. And then there's also that the bunny is in a new Easter bonnet, right? For Don. It's a top hat with a bow on it. So then she just comes over, gorgeous white dress, gorgeous pink gloves, and is just like, hey, we have a date. Like, we're going to the Easter parade. And she just acts like everything's cool. Be like, hey, I got you all this stuff. We're just going to make up now. And he's like, oh, okay. And then it also gave the opportunity for Judy to sing Easter Parade. So the title song. And then they just flip it to be related to the guy. So he has his Easter bonnet, and he's going to be the grandest fellow in the Easter parade, right? So then we cut, and they're walking down Fifth Avenue. We don't see Nadine and Johnny again, although he does call her, and apparently they're going to go, but we don't see them. So I don't know if Johnny just knuckles under and is like, she's good enough, or what happens with that. But so then we have Fred and Judy walking down Fifth Avenue, and he presents her with an engagement ring. So obviously he was planning to propose before this whole thing with Nadine happened, right? Because he already had a ring. Probably didn't go out Easter morning trying to buy an engagement ring after they were fighting. Probably already had it, right? And this is kind of funny. I didn't mention this before, but this is a reference to earlier on in the movie. And Judy Garland was actually left-handed. So one of the funny parts during their dance rehearsal is that she would wear a garter on her leg so she could tell which leg was which, because she said that they forced her to write with her right hand because they thought she'd become a criminal. Like, it was a weird belief that if you were left-handed, it meant something, which obviously we know it doesn't. So that was kind of funny. So when he gives her the engagement ring, she gives him the wrong hand and he slaps it away and puts it on the correct hand. So that's just kind of a cute moment. Something else I did forget to mention, one of the other greatest scenes in this film, after they go clothes shopping and he buys her all the stuff like Nadine. So after they do their first rehearsal and he decides that she's going to be his partner, they have to get her some costumes. So he's like, hey, do men like try to catch your eye, or do they turn around and look at you after you pass? And she's like, I don't know. I never turn around and look at them. Right. So he's like, walk ahead. And he wants to watch and see if any of the dudes that pass them turn around. Then she goes out of frame and we see all these guys like spinning and laughing. And then we pan to her face and she's making like this fishy face, which is just like the cutest thing. So that is one of the best scenes in the movie, is Judy doing that face. So anyway, really great film. Highly recommend it for Easter and along with the 10 Commandments. But Easter Parade's a lot of fun. I just gave you the entire story basically, but the songs and just the fact that this cast came together how it did, because that was not the original intent. Completely different director, different actors except for Judy, right? So it was just interesting. And as I said, it was a smash hit. It broke records. It was amazing for all of these people involved. And what a comeback, really, from the pirate for Judy and from just retirement for Fred Astaire, that they got something that was such a smash hit to kind of springboard off of. So we know Judy went on and had more issues after this, which I'm not going to get into right now, but just looking at Easter Parade, she turns in a fabulous performance. The other piece that I find really interesting is, so that scene where they're dancing, their first performance where she has the ridiculous feathers coming off, she is consistently a beat and a half behind Fred Astaire. So in order to do that though, and if you've seen her dance, you know just how stellar she is. She literally could watch a sequence of steps and then do it because she was just that good. She could watch a move once and then perform it. So it's just another testament to how good she is, that she can consistently be bad. You know what I mean? She can do that step and a half, like beat and a half behind him consistently. It's just really cool to watch. So highly recommend that. Easter Parade is a great thing. Great movie. I watch it every year. My kids enjoy it. It's just one of those great films. And again, to have the cast come together how it did, to have it be as good as it was, all of those things needed to happen. Judy needed to kick Vincent out of the film, and Gene needed to break his ankle. Sid Charisse needed to get hurt. So all of the things happened like that to make this as great of a movie as it was. Would it have been as great without those circumstances? I couldn't say, but I'm going to probably guess not. Because the combination of them is what makes this a magic movie. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. If you have seen it, I encourage you to watch it again because it's a great time of year for it. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at Easter Parade.